Hi, I'm Steve Kozak, and welcome to Image Makers. Today, my special guest is Doug Bennett from Colorado Springs. Doug is a master photographer, a craftsman photographer. He's been the Diamond Photographer of the Year. He's a Geo winner. Every award that I think you can come up with, Doug has taken that home. So I'm very excited to have you with us today, Doug. Thanks for being here.
Oh, I'm very honored that you asked me to be a part of this.
You know,
Thank you.
I've always been impressed that you live in Colorado Springs, but you're a TPPA member and you come to our events. It's not in name only. I've always been impressed by that. Why do you come all the way to Texas to attend our programs?
Well, first off, y'all have great programs, so let's be upfront about that. That's a big part of it. But I have an affinity for Texas. I was born and raised in Seminole, Texas, out in West Texas, 80 miles south of Lubbock. Went to school at Texas Tech. And then I have to admit, I love the barbecue in Texas. It beats what we have it beats what we have here in Colorado Springs. And I know that's not too hard to do, but it's great there. But still, y'all have a great big organization. And anytime I speak at any of the Texas events, I've always told the people, I said, you don't know how lucky you are with what you have. Participate in it, protect it, keep it going. So, because for so many of the other states who are smaller, like us in Colorado, that's kind of hard to do.
You know, we do have a wonderful association, and it's thanks to our leadership team and their vision and their efforts to keep us going strong. And so we're thrilled that you are part of us. Even
Well,
living in Colorado, you're a Texan at heart. Um,
that's right. That's right.
Colorado has something that Texas doesn't have, and that's like real mountains and really large mountains. And that's kind of where I first started getting to really become interested in who's Doug Bennett photographing these amazing mountains in Colorado that I want to be photographing. How did you get started doing landscape photography?
Well, it all traces back, I think, in my childhood. I was really lucky, fortunate that my dad loved taking traveling vacations out into the western U.S. And a lot of that was into Colorado. And so I gained, even though as a kid I hated the long car rides and I felt like my dad didn't stop at enough motels or swimming pools. I think that's where it kind of started. He made me go into the Whitney Western Art Gallery Museum in Cody, Wyoming when I was about 13. I didn't want to go, but after a stern lecture, I went in there. And when I walked in there, I saw these humongous oil paintings by Thomas Moran and some other famous art, Albert Bierstadt. And as a 13-year-old, I was stunned. And I just couldn't help but look at the beauty of those things. And so, of course, my dad looked at me and he said, "See, I was right to make you come here." So, so I think that's where it all started.
You're really fairly new to photography as a whole. When I was reading your notes, you kind of started in, did I see 2009?
I started before then. 2009, I think, is when I got my first digital camera. I was shooting slide film prior to that, but I had an Air Force career, 28 years. I retired from the Air Force in 2000 and moved to Colorado Springs, and I planted some tulips and they looked real good and I wanted to take a photo of them. So I didn't have a camera. So I went and bought a disposable Fuji box camera and decided, well, I ought to get back into this. The kids are grown up, they quit playing with me. So I went and bought a Nikon film camera and started shooting slides. And then I thought, hey, I live in Colorado here. I need to start going down to the mountains. And the first time I went down there, I was along Dallas Divide. I'm sure you know where that's at.
Yeah,
And yeah, I thought, my gosh, it's gorgeous here, beautiful. And I essentially did not know how to go about taking a photo that would capture that. And I realized I had a lot of learning to do, and I started reading books, buying books. So Barnes and Noble made a lot of money off of me buying photography. So that's kind of how it all started.
I don't know that there's really a more inspirational part of the country than the Southwest. So from Colorado to Arizona and Utah, and I see many of your images are from places that I've trekked through. Of course, I didn't come away with the images that you came away through, but why is that area so inspiring?
Well, for me personally, I love the history of it. Like out in southern Utah, people probably have heard the stories that that was where Butch Cassidy hung out in Robber's Roost. That, and then in New Mexico, for example, you've got the ancient Pueblo history. That's where Coronado came in and did his entrada way back in, I think, 1540, if I'm not mistaken. So Laura and I had the good fortune a few years ago to actually go down to the Zuni Pueblo, and an anthropologist, Zuni Nation member, took us out to Hawaca, which was the big pueblo that Coronado encountered when he made his entrada there. And he was actually injured at the Hawaca Pueblo. So I enjoy reading all of that and knowing that history. And then, of course, it's rugged beauty. It's open. I have a German photography friend, and he loved coming there just because he says, I can see forever and not see anybody.
Mhm.
Of course, living in Heidelberg, I could understand where he was coming from. So it's just so many myriad different things that really draw me in terms of experiencing it and photographing it.
Yeah, so speaking of rugged beauty, do you mind if we look at your portfolio a moment and let you
Not at
talk about
all.
some of these images?
Well, this one is Utah. A lot of people think of Utah as Canyonlands and all this. This is actually near Hanksville, Utah. This area I saw on a map is actually referred to as Blue Valley. The blue that you see there is actually being lit by the sky. It's a late evening shot. The sunlight is hitting the rocks up above there. So I love the complementary colors that was going on here. I love the deep shadows that you see from these gullies, really recording the erosion that has occurred here over millennia. And so I just love this image because, one, it signifies that remoteness. It signifies the passage of time with the erosion, and then the color of it is just gorgeous.
Talk to me about this image.
Okay, well, this is pretty far removed from the Southwest. This is actually taken in the United Arab Emirates. These sand dunes are outside of Abu Dhabi. It's part of what's called the Empty Quarter. The Empty Quarter was where they filmed some of the scenes from the first Star Wars movie, as I understand it. Laura and I just love shooting there. We've been back there 2 times now, and getting out in the dunes both in the morning and the evening, and the textures that you see, the shapes from the wind. It's just some of the most fun shooting we ever had because you can just point the camera in any kinds of different ways and start seeing these kinds of patterns and that sort of thing. So, and I titled this one "Composed by the Wind" because for us that's what happened there.
You know, dunes are such an abstract subject to photograph, kind of like the slot canyons. If you've been through the slot canyons in Arizona, it's very abstract. How do you go about finding composition and design in something that's really so abstract you can't really define exactly what it is you're seeing?
A lot of it is you can't go, first off, you can't go in preconceived notions so much. You have to just let the scene speak to you a little bit. But what we have done is that as part of our learning in photography, we've really poured ourselves into understanding composition much further than just the rule of thirds. And one of the things we stumbled across in the last year is referred to as dynamic symmetry. There's some YouTube videos out there on this that we looked at and studied and bought some books on. And so once we learned those concepts and the understanding of what it's about and what to look for, it really aids us in going out to a place like that and start seeing the scene, having all of this in our head, if you will, kind of pre-wired in a sense. And of course, as you get out there and shoot and practice doing that, you see it more and more. And this has kind of helped me overcome the what do I do when I was at Dallas Divide that time and had no idea how to capture a scene that communicated the essence of where I was at.
You mentioned dynamic symmetry. Let's take a look at an example of that. Maybe you can walk us through it.
Look at the angle going from the lower left to the upper right. Now, it doesn't go from the corner to corner, but see right in the center of the image, if you look at the angle of that, it kind of mirrors if you were to draw a line from the left-hand corner of the image to the upper right. See how that angle of that dune parallels that angle? In dynamic symmetry, that angle from the lower left to the upper right is called the Baroque angle. And the Baroque angle was, the old masters, you can see these Baroque angles, and they are very pleasing to look at. Whenever you have an image that has these Baroque angles going on, the viewer will tend to respond to the scene in a more positive way, a feeling of calm and overcome them. But generally speaking, where landscapes, you're wanting the viewer to feel a sense of calm, peace, restfulness, and linger in your image. Angles following that Baroque angle are going to get you far down the road. So I know as I composed this scene, I had that thought in my mind. And then if you look at the angle of the sand dune kind of in the middle ground, you'll notice that angle is somewhat parallel to the angle we were looking at just before. And so when you have these parallel angles, parallel lines lining up, it's referred to in dynamic symmetry as gamut, G-A-M-U-T. Usually we think gamut is like the color space or something like that. But this is talking about that parallelism going on. And when you have that, it creates a harmony in your image that also will resonate well with the viewer. The other opposite angle, going from the upper left down to the lower right, is referred to as the sinister angle. Now, I don't know how these names came about, but the sinister angle is not near as pleasing in looking at a landscape scene such as this. Now, there may be a particular scene you're shooting where lines and angles that are parallel to the sinister angle may be more appropriate to the subject. The sand dunes provide all kinds of opportunities to see these angles, to see textures, and to combine all of that. So it actually has been some of the most fun landscape photography we've ever done.
Now I'm gonna read something you wrote. Now I want you to explain yourself here.
Sure.
You wrote, nature often makes her own expression and statement in ways that are unique to the scene and the moment. What does that mean?
Mm-hmm. Well, nothing really profound. It's just capturing the scene with some unique storm clouds clearing, unique light bursting through, purely a moment in time when all the elements are coming together, the light, the storm, the subject, the mountain, whatever it might be, all coming together to really work as a synergistic whole. And so trying to capture those images, for us landscapers, we get out there early in the morning, out there late in the evening, trying to capture that kind of light. So it's really about light, because you can have great storm clouds in the evening or in the middle of the afternoon, and it might work great for black and white, obviously, but for a color photo, it may not work quite so well. So that's kind of what I was referring to, is sometimes you get up early, you know how it is, go out there early and nothing happens. The air is not clean, there's no clouds, the light is not there, and so that is not one of those magical moments. So sometimes we don't get to move the softbox around and turn up the light to get the light ratios we want. We just have to give what nature gives us.
I started out being interested in fishing. I did a lot of fishing, and as I became a photographer, I realized that photographers keep the same schedule that the fishermen do.
That's right. That's right.
Early in the morning, go in, eat lunch, take a nap, scout your new spot, and then go out and fish in the evening. It's kind of what we.
Well, that's it, exactly.
So I'm going to share this image, and I'd love to hear about it. I suspect this isn't Colorado.
It is not. This is in the Columbia River Gorge, east of Portland, Oregon. This is called Matlatko Falls. My title for it was Eden's First Light. To me, it was just Garden of Eden light. That's kind of the feeling I had when I saw this scene. This photo really means a lot to me. It was actually on the cover of Texas PPA, I think a year and a half ago or thereabouts, when I wrote an article about shooting in Oregon for Texas PPA magazine. This image I had entered in before I was a PPA member. I had entered numerous competitions up and down the Front Range of Colorado, meaning the Front Range of the Rockies, and it had done real well for me. I'd had I think, a first place in landscape, and then a couple of best of shows, and it put quite a bit of money in my pocket, $1,800 actually. Then Rick Gavilow started saying, "Hey, you ought to join PPA and participate in print competition." And I was kind of questioning, why would I want to do that? There's no money to be won, and there's no ribbons, and so just pay to enter. But I did, and it didn't merit that first year, even though it had done real well in print competition in these shows around Denver and Boulder and here. But I got a video critique, and so the next year I thought, well, whatever they tell me to do in that critique, I'm going to do it. I did it, and when I finished up, I was in love with the image. And the original version that I had that had done so well for me, quite frankly, I couldn't stand to look at it anymore because I saw all the faults that it had. So here, just one video critique, it probably lasted 3 or 4 minutes. I had a wealth of knowledge that I was not learning from participating in print competitions here in Colorado. Even though we've won awards and have done this, that, and the other, guess what? I still get video critiques because there's always something more to learn, another perspective, and so we love it to death.
Image competition, I just can't say enough good things about it. I know there are folks who dismiss it for whatever reasons they dismiss it, but the only way we grow is if we decide internally that we want to grow as a photographer. And I don't know any other way to do it better than going through image competition. I just think if you're not currently participating in image competition, I wish you would have a change of heart and give it a go. You may not be successful your first year. It's a growing process, and holy cow, I just don't know that there's anything better.
I couldn't agree more. The first time I went to Professional Photographers of Colorado, I was not a member yet. I didn't enter. I went and watched the print competition, and when I saw the jurors charge, and they talk about the jurors putting aside their biases and looking at the 12 elements, right then I think is when I started buying in. And if I can expand on that for just a moment, I've heard a lot of photographers say, well, I get that master's degree, I learned, but I don't think it really makes any much difference with my customer. In my case, I was selling prints in a nice upscale gallery here in Colorado Springs. And the owner of the gallery, she kept track of my print competition success, and she wanted to know about it. And part of it, I later discovered, is that being here in Colorado Springs and close to the mountains, on average, each week she'd get 3 or 4 landscape photographers coming in wanting to sell their work in her gallery. And she didn't really want that. She was trying to turn them away. She had bought into my stuff, liked my stuff. And so she would basically point to my print competition success. When you've done that, come talk to me. So it kind of became a way of gapping myself with the competition, if you will.
Yeah, it set the bar.
Yeah. And the other interesting thing, and I was totally amazed by this, there was one image of Pikes Peak and Garden of the Gods, not garage. Can't believe us. But anyway, she had sold a number of those in a large print size. And so anytime she ordered up another one before I sent it off to my printer guy, I would look at it again just to make sure everything's okay. And as I'd gotten further into print competition, I would see little things that like, oh, a little too much contrast here, maybe a little darker here, a little bright, just small, minute adjustments. And I remember doing that on that one image, and the printer brought it down to drop it off at the gallery, and I was there, and we rolled it out and looked at it. And she looking at it, and she says, gee, I don't know why, but this just looks better than before. And the adjustments I made were minute. And so that too sold me on print competition, because that's what instructed me and made me see that these little things needed attending to. And if that's one thing about, a lot of people say, well, print competition gets too picky. it's that pickiness that makes the difference. And
You sell your work regularly through galleries, and I know that a lot of photographers coming into the business think that they would love to have their work in galleries. It's just not that easy. What advice would you give to someone who's thinking they would like to have their work put into galleries?
first and foremost, it's just got to be high quality work. My gallery owner, she wanted to sell very large prints, and they had to be sharp. So the technique of landscape photography, not choosing an f/22 that's really going to cause a lot of diffraction and soften things up. Couldn't do things like that. Can't blow out highlights. All the things that we learned from print competition, those were things that maybe she didn't know specifically, but if she saw that, she knew it wasn't good, like a blown highlight or what have you. And so that's part of it.
Let's take a look at this.
This is just near Telluride, not too far from the airport, off of the north end of Last Dollar Road. One year we happened to go by there, and these colors were, as you see them here, I probably pumped them up just a little bit, but just shocked. Now, and this is maybe 6 or 7 years ago. We go back there every year, check these out, and not once has these kind of colors popped into that particular location.
Do you think landscape photographers can take away anything from a portrait photography class?
Certainly that is true for both Laura and I. We feel strongly about that. We came into this PPA, as somewhat accomplished, I guess you might say, with landscape, but still had lots to learn. And because we were forced into some wedding photographer by Laura's mom, and started going to some of that and saying, hey, if we're going to do this, we want to do it as best we can. And so as we went to those things, really with the mind of learning how better to shoot, let's say a bridal portrait or something like that, the concepts of highlight to shadow, the transitions, the bringing out of depth in an image, separating the subject from the background, all that sort of thing, we realized, and because we had it in our mind now, we began to apply that when we went out shooting the landscape.
You've mentioned Laura several times. Laura, of course, is your wife, who
Right.
just became one of the newest ASP fellows.
That is
Uh,
right. Yeah.
what an amazing exhibit she put on. I'm sure that there's got to be some degree of competition between the two of you when you go out and photograph. Yet, you do your own thing, but does that push both of you to do better?
Well, for both of us, we both have a strong desire to learn and get better. We're the last to think that, okay, we've got this now, we're done. So we're always looking to learn more because it helps foster our enjoyment of the photography. So we learn from each other. Laura is a little better at software than I am. I would say that, and she tells me, although I'm not sure I buy it, that I'm a little better at composing and cropping than she is. So we learn from each other. The only, in terms of competition, sometimes you show up to a particular scene and there's really one best spot to be at to shoot. So we're kind of banging hips saying, get out of my way. I want that spot. And no, I'm here first. So that has happened a couple of times, but you just hope that magic moment is not passing by right at that moment that she's got my spot. So
Let's take a look at this image.
I call this one Good Night, My Loves. This is a roundhouse for the Durango Silverton Narrow Gauge Railroad. That guy just happened to become walking out, but I like the blue of his uniform versus all the other golden tones that you see in this. And this is one where title makes all the difference. I'm not very good at titles. I understand they're extremely important. So my first title on this was All Done at the Roundhouse. And, the trouble was that if he's all done at the Roundhouse, where's he going? The story here now becomes he's going home probably to have a beer and some beans and come back to this hot, grimy, greasy job the next day. And so Laura, I have to give her credit. One morning she says, I think I've got a title for you. How about Good Night, My Loves? And that is certainly the relationship that these guys have working on these locomotives. They don't do it for the money because there's certainly not a lot of money involved in it for them. but they love these locomotives. And if you've ever been around any of these guys, you can see that. And so him walking out, he's put them to bed for the night. It just now tells a much different story, much more emotionally laden story that really helps sell the overall image. This was my first loan shot, the loan image, as a matter of fact.
Tell me about the real estate principle in crafting your images.
It's just a term we came up with, and actually it was an outgrowth of some critiques I'd gotten back on some images from district competitions. I had one again from Dallas Divide. We went over there, and the leaves were beautiful one year, and the snow was already on the mountains a little bit, and that afternoon was a fabulous sunset with golden clouds, and so it was all there: the foreground, the middle ground, the snow on the mountains, the beautiful clouds. So my first version of the image that I entered in a district competition, I had quite a bit of sky in that image. And I think it was Joan Janest who gave me the critique. I do remember that. And she says, you got two things competing here. You got your sky and you got all of this mountain and the beautiful fall colors. She says, what am I supposed to look at? You're given the equal amount of space to each. Which one is more important? And she was saying, of course, it's the color of the leaves, all that. She says, crop down on that sky. Well, that was hard for me to do because I'd been there so many times trying to get that sky. Finally, I got it. I didn't want to throw any of it away. But as soon as I drew a crop down on that sky and left a little bit of it, suddenly the subject really popped out. So the real estate is just looking at your total image size and how much real estate are you dedicating to your subject. Don't want to crowd the subject. Subject placement is all important, all those things, but watch out what you allocate real estate to. When you allocate a lot of real estate to the sky, I'm basically communicating to the viewer, that's what I want you to look at. And really in that image, it works better if I don't do that. So that's the example of kind of what I'm talking about.
That's a great tip. Let's take a look at this image, speaking of real estate.
Yes. This is a good example of that. It's the light, I call it heaven's light. Of course, it's the light that's shooting through the clouds and illuminating those rock faces. This also was taken from Dallas Divide. And this was kind of a mid-afternoon to 2, 3 o'clock time period. That light was shooting through there. Maybe it's a little later than that. But the scene was, it was white. The sunlight on those rocks there was white. The sunlight on the clouds above there was white. And I threw on a long telephoto to zoom in on this one scene because I was already visualizing in my mind of ending up with an image as you see it here, about warming it up and that sort of thing. So here exposure was vitally important because the meter's going to read all of the non-sunlit stuff and tend to try to bring your exposure up, but that has the danger of blowing out the sunlit area. So I had to make absolutely sure that I did not do that because that is the subject of this image. Maybe at the time that I took the shot, it wasn't a magical moment, but I knew enough in software to perhaps get it to that. So
I don't think there's anything but magical moments in that part of Colorado. Dallas Divide, where you're talking about, follows the highway between Telluride and
Ridgeway.
Yeah, and that pristine land to the south of the highway, of course, belongs to none other than Ralph Lauren.
Right.
And some of the most beautiful land I've seen anywhere. I mean, it's pristine. And my other favorite little trivia thing is that little turn to the left at Last Dollar Road. If you look back to your right, that was the house that was used to film the opening of True Grit. So and last time I was there, they're restoring that place, which was kind of fascinating.
That is correct. Yep, sure is.
You mentioned the history being, a part of your love of the Southwest, and I got also very interested in it when I found out that Doc Holliday spent some time up there, and Wyatt Earp, and I don't know, it's a magical place to me, and I know it is to you. We certainly see that in your own work.
A quick little story about how Last Dollar got its name. all the miners would, it was a toll road, and all the miners would pay the toll to get into Ridgeway to go to the bawdy houses, but they had to save their last dollar to get back to the mine.
I don't know if that's true or not, but that's a great story.
Well, I read it in some. It may not be true, but it sounds plausible to me. So.
Oh no, we're going to go with it. It's true. So give me some of the keys to selling landscape images.
What we discovered is, again, Colorado images. Images that had done well in print competition also sold well. So the things that jurors like, customers like too. So that was another reason that we loved the print competition, because it kind of gave that barometer. The other thing that we noticed is, and of course this was fortunate being in Colorado Springs, people are looking for Colorado imagery. If we go to Wyoming to try to sell them a photo from Pikes Peak, Garden of the Gods, or the San Juan Mountains, it's just not going to sell. They want the Tetons, or they want Yellowstone. So I know I took a photo into the gallery here, and it was a great shot of the Tetons, and I thought she's going to love this. And she looked at it, and she says, "Where's this from?" And I said, "Tetons." And she just literally shoved it to the side with her hand, and she said, "Wrong state." So she knew it wouldn't sell. We did notice, Laura noticed that in the art shows that occurred in the spring, that wildflower pictures sold pretty good then, because that's kind of what people are looking forward to and anticipating. For example, people, yeah, it's kind of like skiers. When fall starts, they're antsy to go skiing and they buy all the equipment. Later in the year, when things are kind of tailing off in the ski season, there may be great snow, but now they're interested in canoeing or something like that. So, but certainly the warm colors were good. And I know one of the people that we followed to learn from, Alain Briot, I think he's from the Scottsdale area. He said in Phoenix, cool colors sell, warm colors do not. And that makes sense. So.
Boy, that's knowing your audience, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, it is. It is.
Give us a couple of tips on how to stay inspired.
Well, I think first off, one has to have a love for it and a passion for it. So that, to me, that's almost kind of a prerequisite. If you have that, then I think the inspiration comes easier. The other thing of it is you can't sit back and wait for it to happen to you. You have to think in terms of what are some of the other things that inspire me. I saw a quote, and I use this quote in our presentations a lot. You can't just wait for inspiration to happen to you. You have to go out there and grab it.
Well, Doug, let me tell you what inspires me, and that's the work of Doug and Laura Bennett. And I'm inspired every time I can get in front of one of your images. And if you ever get a chance to stand face to face with an actual image, such as Imaging USA, take the time to do so. It's what you see online doesn't do it justice as compared to when you see those images face to face. And if you really want to pick up some inspiration, Doug and Laura offer workshops, and you actually have one coming up in Hanksville, Utah in October. Tell us about that.
Okay, I will. But first, I want to thank you. You're so kind for your kind comments regarding our work. And we do enjoy sharing that with people. And if you want to buy it, it's always for sale too. So, but yeah, with COVID and all, we started going to Hanksville. We've been there 3 times since Memorial Day, and fell in love with the area and decided, hey, let's do a workshop here. There's a lot that we have found in terms of unique shooting spots that we wanted to share. And in the workshop, we go into a lot more about the dynamic symmetry and all of that, and how we get from walking out the door of the morning to kind of the finished image. We share how we do that, and then we go out there and put it into practice. So our workshop is scheduled the 23rd of October through the 26th of October in Hanksville. And the other thing that we like about it is there's nobody else there shooting. Every once in a while you run across your photography. While our national parks are being pretty much overrun right now, believe me, this place is not. So anyway, we're doing that. If anyone's interested, just Bennett Photography, that's with 2 N's and 2 T's, at ymail.com. It's not Gmail. It is ymail.
Well, thanks. again, Doug, for being my guest, and thank you for watching Image Makers, and we will see you next time.
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. I loved it. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Doug.